Hey, hello there, everybody. Julija Simas here for the Cosmic Intelligence Agency. I'm joined today with Olga Morales to begin our Capricorn Solstice astrology outlook for 2022. It's been quite a year, as we all know. So how's it wrapping up? We have collected a few available agents, to have a look firstly at the Capricorn solstice chart and the next few months and what it tells us about what's coming up or the turnover into 2022. And then we are going to talk to Olga Morales in about some of the things that have happened in the past year that tell us about the pandemic and how we've watched that astrologically. Then we have the wonderful Kelley Hunter, who is going to add her research on what the interesting TNOs, the objects beyond Pluto and Neptune, and what they're doing in the next at this solstice event mainly. And then we will have Louise Edington, who is going to take over for the next hour or so with Patricia Walsh, Rishikavi Raghudas, and Rose Marcus for the feature sort of key astrological aspects for 2022. So thank you all for joining us. It looks like we're getting a good crowd online. And so first of all, welcome Olga Morales. Thanks for joining me again, Olga.
Thank you. I love doing this. You know that.
Kudo, Agent 33. So tell me, Olga, what's your outlook from just a quick look at the solstice chart? We're going to kind of look at it all in a moment, but it's not looking... I mean, there's so many turning points this week. This week, it's not the easiest thing to judge, is it? But
No.
Of course, your expertise is going to help us clear it up a bit, I think.
Well, I just think that I'm going to look back at previous ingresses or Capricorn ingresses and how when I've done a couple of videos, how actually, things have manifested according to, not manifested, actually, we've seen happened,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And that's how powerful they are. So it's really good to, at this time of year, at every ingress, to actually study the charts because they give us so much information. So that's what I want to point out.
Yep.
Looking back too, because, during our cosmic transmissions, we've made quite a few do we call them forecasts according to what we've seen?
Yep.
And that's the whole point of us doing these things, because in a way we're showing just how powerful astrological cycles are. So there you go. So I'm excited because I'm going to use declination. I know probably most of the people today that will be presenting won't be using declination, and it's very powerful for mundane cycles. So that's my little spiel today. And I'm not even doing midpoints, believe it or not.
Wonderful. Well, I'm just seeing all the people online with us. So fantastic to see the names. This is the good thing about streaming from StreamYard. You can see what's going on as well and who's with you. So that's cool.
Oh, great.
You can see it down the side there, agents, if you want to read. So yeah, like we this solstice week, or before 2022 begins, there's quite a few shifts. Of course, we're in the middle of the start of Venus retrograde right now. A few of us will be talking about that because it begins the year. Venus retrograde begins the year, Mars retrograde ends 2022. So the two of them in 2022 are probably, I want to say, the key sort of motivators for 2022. We're, of course, in the middle of the Saturn-Uranus square, the third exact one, which the dynamics continue all throughout 2022. So although there's not an exact square, they're still within 1 degree and a couple of degrees of square each other for the whole year. So the the dynamic of, you know, control versus freedom, and all of what we've been talking about these two for the last, you know, year or so or more, is still in effect. Of course, Venus retrograde conjunct Pluto happens 3 times. She's already done it exactly. She is doing it again on Christmas Day for us, and then returns to Pluto at the end when she's finished her retrograde in February with Mars. So again, they're very connected throughout 2022. And before the end of the year, Jupiter ingresses into Pisces. So if we look at the Capricorn solstice chart, which we have been doing for a long time as the CIA agents, you know, gather at the turning points of the year, we know that that is all about the sun moving into the cardinal sign of 0 degrees of Capricorn. It is the winter solstice in the northern hemisphere and the summer solstice in the southern hemisphere, as the Earth is tilted to the full kind of aspect of the sun's furthest move south, which is denoted by the Tropic of Capricorn. And of course, astrologers have for a long time looked at these cardinal ingresses as the telling points, or any ingresses, like significant ingresses or aspects, as the charts that you look at to tell you what is ahead. Okay, so what really stands out, of course, in this Capricorn solstice chart is the moon opposite Pluto and Venus. The moon represents the people. The moon in Cancer represents security, protection, you know, being motivated by our feelings and intuitions and the watery aspects of ourselves. So it's quite a emotional sort of move into 2022. And I think, especially from what we've gone through as a collective, for what people are going through, there's a lot more, let's say, attention to what people's needs are, which is a good thing. So just a few, you know, bigger aspects of what's going on. The moon is, again, very important in what's happening. Another part of what's happening, of course, is the mean node moves to what do you call it? The polarity of Taurus and Scorpio just in the next day. So the solstice is about 24 hours away from now, a bit less, I think, like the exact ingress. So for most of us, it's tomorrow. And then the nodal shift happens for the mean nodes, whereas the true nodes will shift only in January. They're about 6 weeks apart in movement. So whichever nodes you move, we're in the middle of it. It doesn't really matter. I don't think it really matters. What about you, Olga? Do you use true node or me? No,
I use a true node.
Yeah, okay. And I think a lot of us use the true node because it does replicate more of the drag and movement which the nodes represent. So it, you know, moves back and forward, and so it's a lot more time. But anyway, we are moving into that dynamic, and of course, we've already had an eclipse in Taurus, a lunar eclipse in Taurus that has heralded, let's say, the shift of the nodal aspects. Now, moving into Taurus and Scorpio, this is, you know, it's quite a shift from the airy Gemini nodes and all the chaos that has been messing with our minds, I think I'd like to say, for the last year and a half. And it becomes much more a manifestation and a reality hit. Olga, I'm seeing this nodal shift having a lot more to do with earth changes and really dynamic sort of moves to, let's say, protect ourselves or be much more conscious of what we've done to the planet, or, you know, like how we're involved with how we use resources, pollute. You know, it's almost like a karmic tale of Scorpio to go into the Taurus North Node. How do you see that?
Yeah, well, because we'll be having, you know, eclipses in those signs. If you look at the old mundane astrology books, they always say that when they're in the fixed signs, we have more earth changes and,
Yep.
that sort of thing, because they're fixed and they're, so yeah, it will be to do with our resources, our income,
Yep.
and lots of things like that.
Yeah, finance, economy.
Yep.
It's also, as I said earlier, Venus and Mars straddle the year in their retrogrades, and of course they're both rulers of the nodes. Mars, the traditional ruler of Scorpio, and Venus, the ruler of Taurus. So it's really kind of igniting, getting that impulse. For all of us, we might be feeling the need to feel more secure about our spending or our money or our Bitcoin or how our the value of our resources and all that sort of thing.
Also debt
And debt.
yeah, I think a lot of people will be dealing with how they're going to pay off their debt.
Okay, so yes,
including all the countries, including all the countries,
yeah. I mean, Venus ruling the North Node is also, Mars is the heat sort of element of the planets, isn't he? He heats things up, whereas Venus cools things down. So, as we anticipate the 40 days and 40 nights of Venus retrograde, there is this kind of cooling element to the Capricorn realm. So perhaps more, let's say, amicable deals going on and, and relationships changing, in that economic world or in the world of governments and so on. And we can already see some of those things taking place. We move into, if we look at this chart, we can see that we've got Eris, Uranus and Ceres all retrograde. Now they will, and Venus, of course, retrograde, and they will move all direct in January, which changes the dynamic after Venus and Mercury finish their retrogrades in February, when we have a period of time where we call it, I can't remember the initials now, where all the planets are direct, and they're direct for about into April. So there's a window of time there where I feel as though things are really going to, let's say, open up a lot more for us in many, many ways after these retrogrades are all finished. Okay, so, a bit of a looping before we get there. And also, what was my notes here look quite small. Sorry. I know what I'm talking about. So, as we look ahead into 2022, these are some of the things that we're noting, but also the big thing that a lot of astrologers talk about is the Kala Sapa, where, once Mars has now moved into the nodal, axis, all the planets except for the moon and Black Moon Lilith, who is not a planet, are outside of that, outside of this, cauldron. So this is an interesting phenomenon which we've talked about various ways over the years, over the last 2 years, really, since this kind of started, when Mars went into the South Node early February, I think it was, of 2020. And pretty much the pandemic really kind of took hold on us, right? And we were locked down and all that kind of thing. So there's a lot of predictions of these lockdowns becoming coming back in some kind of way. But I see it as the passports, the passports that are preventing, things being able to move around and all that kind of stuff. So, but also, so it's going to be quite a while. Of course, the moon will move out every month out of this cauldron, and then we actually have to wait till the Sun, Mercury, and Venus will start moving out again, which is quite a while. I think that's also into April. So, interesting few months ahead, heralded by Venus going retrograde, or being retrograde. And there's also a comet.
Everything's happening.
Everything's happening. I went to look for the comet last night. This is the northern hemisphere view, but in the city, there's too many kind of lights, so I couldn't see it even through my binoculars, but I will try again. Has anyone seen the comet? Has anyone been able to see a comet? No. But anyway, go and have a look, or I might even drive out of the city tonight, Olga,
Yeah.
to because we've got a clear night. So I might take a bit of a mission, out to see if I can see it. So now comets. What do comets represent in your world, Olga, astrologically?
Well, they're always as a huge sign of something coming. And
Something
usually
coming or going.
or
Yeah.
going a huge omen, and depending what sign they're in too. That was the one that.
Well,
Um,
he's been near Venus, so
mm,
very much in that same area. Again, so a comet Venus Pluto combination is, I remember a comet from a few years ago. I can't remember what it was called, but Nelson Mandela died. He
yeah.
left the planet on a comet. Popes have left on a
Mm,
comet. And last year there was a comet, again, I can't remember his name, but Agent 64 left on a comet.
oh, that's right. Yeah.
So, some profound things can happen in that way. Again, balancing, the leaving, but the coming of something new and perhaps some kind of new leadership. I really see 2022 as bringing in the beginnings of, brewing, a new kind of leadership story around the world. I'm not sure how, but I can kind of see it in various ways. Now, I just want to have a look at the eclipse that we just had, Olga, just really
Yes.
briefly at 12 degrees of Sagittarius, because we've had a few things that sort of have happened just in this week on the eclipse line that happened. I know it's quite faint down here, but the eclipse lines were over the Antarctic. Okay, it was a really small eclipse, but it was, sort of started from the Antarctic and moved over and actually even touched Melbourne and Tasmania. And there was a great tragedy in Tasmania where a bouncy castle killed 6 children as it was blown away.
Yeah.
So, and if you look at the chart up here in Australia, the Mars goes right through Tasmania there. There's also, of course, been a tornado in Kentucky again, and the lunar eclipse before that was Taurus Scorpio. So really sort of highlighting the Earth changes upon us as well, and what we may, realize about that. There's also a glacier called the Doomsday Glacier that they're very concerned about in Antarctica, which they're fearing will shatter very soon. And then, of course, the eclipse being down on the Antarctic there, Antarctica, not Antarctic.
Antarctica.
I just want to bring us back to a year ago when the Solstice chart had the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction in it as well, right? So if we think about the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, where there was so much talk and celebration about starting a new era. I mean, what have we seen about Saturn and Jupiter in Aquarius? This chart is perhaps a live chart, as we've mentioned before, for not only the 20 years that Jupiter and Saturn rule, because they have a 20-year cycle before they meet again, but also the move into the element air. And, as we've moved into this so-called Aquarian sort of era, what we've seen is the dystopia of the Aquarian age a lot more than the utopia that was, heralded and, we're all excited about. And so we're right at the beginning of it still. And it's not to say we can't get into the more utopian field, and we will, because that is our aim and meaning as conscious, sentient beings. But we're seeing the dystopia way, way clearer at the moment, aren't we? With the control and passports, and you can't do this and you can't do that unless you abide by all these rules. So I just wanted to remind us of how potent the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction still is. Okay, it's still there. And interestingly, Mars and Venus will meet at 0 Aquarius in February. After they meet with Pluto, their next conjunction will be at 0 Aquarius. So bringing in that that Jupiter, Saturn, as we move forward, Jupiter, we are controlled, Saturn to do the right thing, but Mars and Venus will reactivate that in a new way, in a new light. It's almost like they're colluding together to cool off and heat up certain things. And also Mars and Venus, they travel together for a very long time, from when they meet in Capricorn, just after Venus comes to light, still retrograde at the end of January, through February, and even up until the Aries ingress in March. So again, Mars and Venus, where are they going to leave their trail in your chart as well, is a very defining place for all of us to look at, from Capricorn to Aquarius, what they're doing in your chart. And their meetings like that are actually quite rare. Mars and Venus also have a 32-year cycle where they come together or do the same thing every 32 years. So again, they're retrogrades in the area around Gemini for Mars and in the area around Capricorn for Venus happened 32 years ago, which was 1990. And there was a lot of things that happened in 1990 to, let's say, herald us into looking at 2022 as a very innovative year. The Hubble telescope was launched, the World Wide Web server was launched, and lots of other things that I've talked about elsewhere at the OPA event the other day and so on. And I haven't got time to go into it all, but just to kind of alert us to the no matter what we see about, let's say, what we might not like going on in the world, there is this incredible sort of resurfacing or surfacing of great new ways forward. Of course, that's very much involved with AI and the digital leap, and we are going way, way further up into that Aquarian age as we go. The nodal shift, yes, okay, happening 18th of January during the Venus retrograde is, again, important to keep an eye on. And I'm just going to finish up. I haven't got much more time because I want to get on to Olga. But the Venus star point is the culmination of the Venus retrograde, which will happen at 18 Capricorn. And looking at the Venus star point, we look back in 8-year cycles to know that 8 years ago, 2014, Venus was retrograde within that area as well. But also 4 years ago, she had her what we call outer conjunction point. That is often not, let's say, considered much in astrology, but more and more so these days. So for your own lives, think about what was happening 4 years ago and 8 years ago to understand what the Venus retrograde is also picking up for you at this time. We have a lot more information about the Venus star in our latest symposium, if anyone's interested in that, to have a bigger look at. But the Venus star is very much, brings back a lot of information, a lot of themes on the global surface as well, which are things like the rise, rising up against the patriarchy in many, many ways. The sexual abuse scandal that's going on with Ghislaine Maxwell, Me Too movements. Venus star has really sort of pumped up those things in the Capricorn Venus cycle. I'm going to not talk about this. We do know what Venus means and what Capricorn means. So it's very much about a reset of the system somehow. We might not see it immediately, and we might not see it immediately. We might feel it more immediately in our own lives, but on a global scale, this Venus star point is pretty much active for the next 9.5 months. So we're going to see a lot of, let's say, maybe taking down of governments, leaderships changing, the elite being in the spotlight for doing wrong and so on. So, keep an eye on that as we all, as Venus, let's say, wants to rebalance and readjust the system in so many ways. This is Ghislaine's chart with the transit at the moment, and we can see, that the solstice point, I think her trial finishes tomorrow or something, or the jury comes, has to decide, with Venus and Pluto on her Saturn, and with Saturn right on her midheaven and Jupiter. And just another one, Novak Djokovic is really interesting because in Australia, he's being said that he's not vaccinated. He doesn't want to be vaccinated. And as a big star of the Australian Open, he's now sort of claiming that he wants to come with a medical exemption. Now, look at where the Venus star point is for him, right on his ascendant. So he's very much in the spotlight about, what we can and can't do as as one of the people, the elite sportsman of the world. So I'm going to leave it there, Olga, because we have to get on to you.
Okay.
And next, I have got a few more things, but I might top them up later. So, and the other agents for the next sort of hour will be adding a lot more information about some of those points. So, hang on, I've got to get your slide in here. There we go. Thanks, Olga.
Do I expand it, Jules, or leave it like this?
You can just do the play. Remember how it was at the bottom?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Make it full screen?
Yeah, make it full screen.
Okay.
It's better for everyone watching on, phones and so on. Yeah.
Okay, so it's nice and clear?
It is. Thank you.
Oh, okay. So what I'm going to do very quickly, because I've got a few slides too, I just want to show the importance of, why we study these ingress charts. And this is when in 2017, when I did the ingress video for the Capricorn ingress, I actually wanted to look back because at that time in 2017, it was the first time that Saturn was going to be conjunct the ingress, the Capricorn ingress. And what I did surprised me because I wanted to know how long ago did this happen? Was there another time that Saturn was conjunct the Sun at the Capricorn ingress? And of course, when I looked back, it took me all the way back to 1664, and that was when we had the bubonic plague.
Yeah,
and so
wow.
yeah, and so in my video, I spoke about this. Now, remember, this is 2017. We didn't know anything about COVID yet. So what I want to just highlight too is that I use declination quite a bit, and I also have been using the fixed stars quite a lot. Now, if you look at the fixed stars, the two that are mostly related to pestilence and contagious diseases, one is called ACRAB or Graphiase, depending, sometimes it's written differently, in the head of the scorpion. Okay, and the declination at currently is minus, that means southern declination 19.48. Okay, and Antares, which is the heart of the scorpion, its declination is minus 26. So I put them in this chart. This is the chart for the actual ingress in 1664. So the astrologers of that time, they would have seen this huge cluster, first of all in Capricorn, but also in Aquarius. So we've got this whole pattern here. Can you imagine when we put that on a chart, what that looks like? Okay, Pluto obviously wasn't discovered yet, but it's sort of out there on its own. So we've got this huge cluster of planets in a small section of the zodiac. Okay, now when you look at all the cards are connected to certain planets. They give them a theme. And these stars, especially the ACRAB, has a Mars Saturn influence. And apparently they've connected it to the 16th card of the Arcana in the Tarot, which is the Tower. So all these things, like you sort of bring your picture together of what was happening. After the bubonic plague, there was the fire of London, if you recall, in 1666. So it's interesting how this Tower of Fire and the whole thing comes about. But then what I want to do is when you put this, I love using declination, as I said. When you put your lines on your graphic ephemeris, this is 1664, okay? And what I've done is I've actually made sure that I've imported A crab, so that's at 19 south declination, and Antares is 26. So it's an out of bounds thing. This is where, when planets get out of bounds, we should be knowing what fixed stars are being activated. It's really interesting research, I must say. But have a look at this. So have a look at those black lines. You can see, because all the planets were in Capricorn and Aquarius, they're southern declinations. They're signs of southern declinations. So you can see how they're all clustered together. And the only one was Pluto in the north, the northern declination.
Yeah,
okay.
right.
So Mars started out north, but then towards the end, when we're looking at the actual ingress point, okay, so this is our Capricorn ingress. Look at them all together. Okay. And then
So it's like a double whammy. It's not just them in Capricorn, they're all in the same position of the sky.
Yeah, so they're all there, and then Mars comes along, always the one that instigates everything and sort of triggers things. And it wasn't touching Antares, but close enough. But it was at the point where it was going through a crab. Okay.
Oh, wow.
So then when I look at the next slide, I put it on, obviously, the maps. Like, this is how we do mundane astrology. I mean, the ingress charts we should be putting on our world maps anyway. But imagine, you can see all that clustering of Capricorn and Aquarius. We've got a whole lot of planets in the same area. Obviously, they're going to highlight, all these places at the same time. But you can see it going literally that the Sun, Saturn, because they were conjunct in Capricorn, right going through London in here. Okay. And then the whole thing spread through Europe. But the amazing thing is that it also culminates through China. And apparently the bubonic plague started from the east, from fleas from China, going, shipping and so forth. Okay.
Right.
So you can just see the alignments. And obviously then it spread all over the world. But I think Europe was the one that was more in, had the most impact there. So this is what, then I looked, when did the video, I looked at that. I'm thinking, at the time we didn't know about COVID, so I just kept, this is how you do research as astrologers. We should be looking back, right? And so so this is what it looked like. And then in 2017, this is when I did the video, we can see the same, that Saturn was conjunct the Sun. But there weren't a whole lot of planets in Capricorn yet, but there was, Pluto was in Capricorn, okay? But another aspect that was, I've seen a lot in these ingress charts when we're looking at diseases, is Mars Neptune. Now, Mars Neptune, according to Edington, is the infections, disease, and sickness, okay? Even if they're in trine, it doesn't matter there, because with cosmobiology, it's the combination of the planets. It doesn't necessarily mean the aspect that they're making. Okay, so it's interesting that when I kept doing these charts, there's Mars and Neptune keep making a pattern, an aspect, right?
And that's often misread. Thanks for bringing that up, Olga, because you see, trines and going, well, that should be good, but in fact, it's like it's not, it's not as good as we think.
No, not according to Cosmo, because it's the combination of the planets that makes a difference, not actually the aspect as much. So this is what started me going back to the bubonic plague when I found that, which is it's actually almost 360 years. Okay, it's actually 354 years, that cycle. Because Saturn doesn't make, I mean, we've rounded off to 30 years, but because it's 29.5, it doesn't make 360 years. But that cycle for me was so exciting, because this is one of Gann's, WD Gann is always into 360, 450, 45, and so, like, it was just an amazing thing. It got me very excited. So then when I looked at 2017, I could see that the planets were coming all into southern declinations, and they were starting to cross a crab. Okay, so I'm thinking, all right, so similar to what was happening in during the bubonic plague. But then I put it also onto the maps, and you can see the lines going through similar areas again. Okay, but this time I put an arrow here. The actual conjunction, Sun Saturn conjunction, was on the IC, which is in the 4th house of a mundane chart, going right through China. Okay, so I mean, I'm under the impression the belief that a lot of the pandemic or the COVID was around a lot sooner than what we think. Okay, so this is, and just these charts tell me that story, but we weren't aware of it until it became a real pandemic. But it was brewing, there was a brewing time. Now look at this, Jules. This is the next one. So this is 2018.
Yeah, right.
In that ingress chart, I mean, Saturn's still in Capricorn. It's moved 10 degrees apart. Pluto's there. The south node is there. But you can see at that time, we've got Mars is actually pretty much, it's moved away. But in that time, it was making an aspect to Neptune. Okay. So there was still this flavor of them too in that. And when we put that on the graphic ephemeris, this is when it got interesting to me, because look what Mars is doing. Mars crossed a crab early in 2018, but then it crossed all the other planets, so parallels. I shouldn't say cross. Okay, these are parallels. And then we can see Pluto, Saturn, and then even Mercury at one stage was in southern declination. That's at the beginning. But then you can see Mars. Mars is going, stationing here, going
He's
through
always got to
parallel.
be in there. Yeah, he heats up
Yeah.
everything.
Then look, and then it was like parallel, like in the midpoint of Pluto and Saturn. How powerful is that? And then look at this. It was parallel to Antares because he was out of bounds. So anytime a planet goes out of bounds, there are certain fixed stars that are, beyond the
They're
ecliptic.
going to be, yeah. Well,
Yeah,
a
they're
lot of
going
the
to.
fixed stars are. It's quite a,
Yeah.
we just sort of, what do you call it? Project them onto the ecliptic,
Yeah.
where in fact they're, kind of all over the place. So yeah, you've got to be
Yeah.
aware of that.
So, sometimes you think, oh, like a planet's not conjunct a star, like, with longitude, but actually in declination, they're actually parallel to that star.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's going through here. Look at this huge cluster in here. I mean, this is probably the time when, things were happening in terms of the disease, or that we don't know about. I mean, I'm speculating here, but I believe that's probably would have been the case. And then when we put it on the maps again, we can see this time the sun is going through just parts of Europe here. Okay. And the other thing I wanted to point out, this is when I started saying, okay, in my video, I said, well, 2019 ingress looks a lot more like the bubonic plague. So I was building my case, okay, because here now we've got Jupiter's in there as well, Saturn, Pluto, okay, and we've got Venus was in Aquarius, like it was during the
Yeah,
bubonic
and there was
plague,
an
right?
eclipse on Jupiter, wasn't there? In
Yeah,
a day later
yeah.
or something.
Yeah, right. And so,
2
and
days
here you
later.
got, and the same time Mars is trine. I mean, it's wide because it's separating, but it was trine before this. Okay, so
Yeah.
this is when in my video I said this looks like a lot more like the bubonic plague. We might have some sort of epidemic. I said in the video. This is what we do. And like the other thing was, so I used this chart. I had this chart in the video saying we had an eclipse there. So you can see all the planets in southern declinations. The eclipses touched them. This is all in 2019. Okay. And we got all the moons coming down. But then once COVID, we heard about it, the first case. Well, it wasn't the first case because remember when we saw the image in China about people, falling down in the street and whatever. That was like at the end of December. And this is when there was a solar eclipse at this point. They're all clustered together in southern declination. And this is when we heard about it. Okay. So it did sort of fit that pattern from almost 360 years ago. But listen, what this, Jules, I mean, you can't make this up. Because when you put it on the map, the actual sun of the ingress chart for the Capricorn ingress went right through China, right? But if I zoom in, it goes right through Wuhan.
Yep.
Okay, so this is the one before we heard about this one here. Okay, so we heard about it and it's actually highlighting that area. Okay, that we heard the first instance of it was in China. So it's amazing how these charts work. When you use them a lot, you get very excited about being able to locate these places. And now, what was this one? This is like 2020. So this was last year. Yeah. So last year we've got, see, now we've got, when we got Jupiter and Saturn into Aquarius as well, they're all like southern declinations. So this, again, look at it. I mean, you know, the pandemic was classified the COVID was classified as a pandemic on the 11th of March. And in here, okay, and it's amazing because at that time, that was when Mars was parallel the South Node, which is always not a good thing, but also it had crossed Acrab at the beginning of the year. And I think in Australia, we were already having, remember all the cruise ships coming and bringing people with COVID, and they had to keep them on the boats and whatnot. So that was already in January in Australia, but it wasn't classified a pandemic for the whole world until here. But then you can see also that Saturn stationed on Acrab, on that part of the fixed star for the whole time in here. Then we also had a lunar eclipse. Okay, so when we heard about the Delta variant, which is fairly recent, was in this little space here, and that's like an eclipse at that time, but it was like a clustering. But can you see that this is Saturn here and Jupiter? Jupiter and Saturn are going conjunct Acrab, not conjunct, I should say,
Are you
parallel.
pointing? Sorry, we can't see a pointer.
Oh, can't you see?
Oh, there
Can
it
you
is. There it is. Yeah.
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 Okay. Sorry. See in here. See how that's Saturn there, and that's Jupiter, and they're parallel,
Together,
and they're going to be parallel.
because that's
Acrab
how
there.
it's, seeing them in the telescope was just like, oh my God,
Yeah.
they look so close from the eye, but I remember seeing it from a telescope that, it was like, oh, they're not, occulting each other, but it's amazingly close. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I was looking at my other screen. I should have been looking here, so I was pointing at the wrong thing. You're looking at me, looking at okay. Yeah, so this is so amazing. I mean, when you look at it this way, I think it's very revealing. So the next slide.
So you always check the declination of things and how they come together as well, for more intensity, really, for more intensity.
Well, this is the actual. So last year, the ingress for last year, we've got the sun culminating over this part, so like Western Europe, Eastern Europe, I should say, and also through Africa in here. But it's just like this is, and I was trying to say there's nothing specifically going through Italy, but we've got to give orb with these things. So the South Node, how Italy had a lot of cases of COVID, a lot of people died there. So that was in that vicinity there. But Australia, I'll show some other slides of Australia.
I think how many more have you got to go? Of course, this is all amazing.
This is now. This is just today. I'm finished
good.
now.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
So,
I was going to say, where are we now?
this is it. This is it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I know, because I've been talking a lot. Okay. So
no, that's right. I'm just conscious of all the others we've got in the line.
Okay. So in this ingress chart today, see how we've got Mars is applying square to Neptune. Okay, so in the next
immutables again.
Yes, which is not, that's all to do with mutations, like viruses and mutations, diseases and so forth, right? And you can see that I've also put, it's almost conjunct, it has been conjunct Acrab, and it's going towards Antares, that little star's Antares. I didn't put the right symbol in for that. So it's at the midpoint of those two stars that are both involved.
So he'll be there in the next few days, really.
Yeah, contagious diseases, right? So what I've done is here, we've just heard about, the new one and the new variant Omicron. At the same time was when actually there was we've had the eclipse, obviously, but Mars, can you see how Mars has crossed the Acrab here at the same time? That red line, that's Mars going through there, right? So
gosh,
this is
Acrab.
yeah, Acrab. They called it Acrab. You know how sometimes Scorpio, if you've seen it in some of the old medieval things, it looks like a crab.
Yeah,
it's got that sort of thing going. So this has got you can see the line going through on the IC, which means it's going through China again. Okay, so this is the ingress today.
Yeah.
Going through China again. Australia's got a whole the Venus-Pluto on the IC going through here, and Uranus going through on the descendant. So I don't want to go through it, but I just think it's amazing how we're going back to China again, but it's the other way around. Instead of being on the midheaven, right, it's on the IC. So it's affecting the people again of the earth, of the country. Okay, so the next slide, I want to look at 2000 next year and what's happening. And I've just put in here, we can see that Mars is going to cross Acrab again in about March, like almost like near the ingress there, around the 21st, right? And I've just said here, maybe we get news of another variant. Not that we want it, but this has been showing in the past. Every time Mars crosses or is parallel this point, we've had news of some new variant. So I've put it in there. But you can see also when we have this lunar eclipse in May, it's going to be parallel to this fixed star, right? So yeah. And when I looked at this lunar eclipse, I thought, oh yeah, okay, I can't swear, but yeah, so it's going to be parallel.
And Mars and Neptune conjunct.
Correct. So
and
we can see that.
Preceding that is, of course, the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, which is another story with G agents I think we'll talk about in the next section. But, that is a big indicator of, just like an opening up of many great things, but also many alarming things, inflation and, mutation, all kinds of stuff. So,
wow. So you can see how difficult this lunar eclipse is with the square to Saturn. It's trying all this, but it's a huge eclipse. This is, I don't know.
We'll talk about them in more detail as they get closer.
Yeah, but you can see how. Look at where the for this eclipse, you can see that it's going right through China again. Okay, Melbourne's going to be hit. It's all descending or culminating over London and Europe. And anyway, you can see all the lines here. And the thing is, it's going to go culminating over New York. And so New York, US, China again in the spotlight for this one. And you can see that it goes through Wuhan again. So this is like repeat, but it's on the opposite side. I just think it's amazing. So there's going to be obviously it's a continuous thing here. Oh, okay, that's my last slide.
Wow, thanks, Olga. Geez,
yeah,
you're always a bit alarming, but for a good reason.
Oh, I just show the truth. I can't help it. I'm a Scorpio. I just tell it how it is, black and white. Sorry if because part of it is my work is because I deal with traders. They want to be alerted to anything that happens on a mundane level is going to obviously have an impact on the markets. And if people are fearful, they're going to sell. And so like, not that I don't want to be an alarmist, but I'm I'm a realist. That's what I am. So
get real with your astrology. There you
go. That's it.
Well, thanks, Olga. We can learn a lot from you, as we know. So we look forward to more from you next year. Hopefully you hang around still with us at the moment. But I want to introduce Kelley Hunter to the stream. Hello, Kelley.
Hello.
Thanks for being here with us today. We invited Kelley along because she just did this amazing talk for the CIA as part of the membership 2 weeks ago on the Trans-Neptunian objects, which is so interesting. And we thought it would be really good to add Kelley's information here. Hang on, I'm just looking for, I'm going to remove Olga for a minute, to add what they're up to during this solstice chart, because what you showed us 2 weeks ago was like, wow, it's quite profound and adds to the bigger story behind what's going on, I think. So over to you, Kelley. Hang on, I want to share your screen for you.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, this is the realm. We're going way out there with these new Kuiper Belt Trans-Neptunian objects that have been discovered since the new millennium. And these got me really excited, initially because so many of them are being named after indigenous creator gods from around the world, you know, really globalizing our mythic pantheon. And I get so excited about this, but also the creator god, goddess aspect. These are really, say, like primeval gods, in the sense that most of these are named for god goddesses who brought the creation into being. So to me, it's a different level of consciousness, which I'm considering to be a kind of quantum consciousness, that we're looking at being invited into a dance with these creator gods that are a different level of consciousness than we usually engage in. And I spent a lot of time in that presentation looking at the solstice chart. So that's why you invited me in, I think.
Well, I think it's also just so beautiful that we are reminded that we are creators, and these creator gods and their sort of aspect to what's going on is very, very needed. So yeah, thank you.
Well, I showed you the ones that basically I've been working with, and some of them I've been more interested in than others. But this is like where they all stand on the solstice. And it's a lot. And we went through it looking at patterns that develop between these TNOs all through 2022. But I want to focus on a pattern that we've been talking about a bit this year, because it is a kind of Pluto-oriented pattern. And this is the solstice chart with my outline of you know, the big activity here. And I just think it's absolutely amazing that the moon in Cancer is opposite the Pluto-Venus. And just the fact that Venus and Pluto are opposite is a very, is an evocation of the divine feminine to me. And Pluto is there as a very transformational agent and is a Kuiper Belt object. So I don't want us to forget that. King of the Kuiper Belt, right at the front edge, and still the largest body in it. And a lot of this year, some people have been talking about the interaction between Pluto and Eris, who was not one of my favorites. She's grown on me, however, necessarily in Aries, and that we had exact conjunctions between Pluto and Eris. And now Pluto's starting to move beyond that exact conjunction. So in effect, Eris is kind of going to be waning a bit in her Pluto dynamic here. And in this whole grand square we're looking at, it's not as close as the other factors. So Eris stays in Aries for quite a while. It's almost twice as far away as Pluto. But we have Haumea. Haumea is the goddess of childbirth in Hawaiian mythology. And Haumea is at the very far edge of Libra right now. And actually later this year, she actually starts moving into Scorpio, just as Pluto's starting to move toward that edge of Aquarius too. So this solstice chart is like a turning point. It's like a pivot in a way, because the influence of Eris, the goddess of discord, she stirs things up. And aren't we glad she does? You know, she just creates a lot of havoc because she doesn't let things lie. She kind of gets along pretty well with Pluto. You know, Pluto has a lot of like the hidden areas going on beneath the surface. And, you know, Pluto is like really kind of exposing a lot of stuff. And Eris is like right on it. Go Pluto, you go Pluto. I'm going to help you here. Let's create a little more havoc and discord and dissent and stir up a lot of arguments and see where everybody's at. Let's just see where everybody's at here.
You know, Eris was conjunct, or Mars was conjunct Eris, and they were square Pluto for the Saturn Jupiter conjunction chart. So it's like it's alive, you know, as I said earlier, it's alive for a while.
Yes, yes, it's true. It's alive for a while. But I do like that Pluto's moving more into a close alignment with Haumea. They are in a fairly long-term square. And back in, say, very late 40s, all through the 50s, pretty much, even as Pluto was moving from Leo into Virgo, so was Haumea. They were in a long-term conjunction for that decade, basically, with the little edges on either side. If you're born in the late 40s or the very early 60s, you would have the conjunction, you know, more or less going on for you. And now they've moved apart enough to be in a fairly long-term square. So this is pretty interesting. Haumea, one of her daughters, is Pele, who's the goddess of volcanoes. And I think of Pluto as being a very volcanic type of energy, you know, bringing stuff right up from down beneath the surface of the earth. So Pluto and Haumea also have a kind of resonance. Well, number one, they're both dwarf planets or Kuiper belt objects or Trans-Neptunian objects, depend on how we want to classify these. And I hope this is very arcane for a lot of people. It's like too much, can't deal with all this new stuff. But I just invite you to find a favorite and get to know this Kuiper belt objects that is inviting you into a very different level of consciousness. It's a different region of the solar system, kind of like the outer planets. That was a whole different realm when we started discovering those. And now we're discovering this whole band where there's a lot of them. It's almost like an asteroid belt. There's so many of them, and they're very tiny, but tiny can be potent. So Haumea is, she gives birth. She gives birth to everything, sometimes from parts of her body, sometimes because it has to be, you know, because she gets so thrilled by bringing things into birth. And then she renews herself so she continue this. So there's a kind of birth and rebirth aspect of Haumea that is resonant with Pluto and its death and rebirth cycle. So they're kind of have some similarities here. And then, you know, the moon like clicks things in. The moon brings it right down up close and personal. So this is really clicking in even as we speak. So to just break this down a little better and give some more visuals, we can look at Pluto in relation to Venus. Not only are we looking at the destructive, you know, and rebirth aspect of Pluto and Capricorn, just, you know, the world as we know it, the bridge has burned behind us. So now what? You know, as we give rebirth and there is more Haumea energy, you know, that Pluto's tapping into, what do we want to give birth to? And I'm thinking of this whole Venus-Pluto retrograde cycle as a kind of opportunity to redesign reality. Now, this is a personal process we each engage in personally, but, you know, this is also a collective transformation going on with Pluto here. And this certainly has to do with our financial systems. Certainly does. Venus is the money planet. And our values in general. You know, how do we want to live our lives, you know, coming out of this really very challenging period? So we're reconsidering our values, we're reevaluating our lifestyles, and basically we get down to one of the most important processes of Pluto, alchemizing fear into love. And that's what Venus stands for. So we're letting go of systems and structures that undermine the joy and harmony in our lives. How do you think about that? That's a good one, huh? That's a good agenda. Let's go for it. And in a sense, we have to kind of rise above some of our engagement on a day-to-day basis, or at least kind of what's going on around us sometimes in the world, whatever reality is anymore, and find a level of consciousness that really resonates and that we want to sustain. That's how I'm looking at this. And I think the Kuiper belt objects with the creator God energy really support that. Even Eris, you know, she may give birth to discord and disharmony. and create conflict and mayhem. But she is a kind of truth warrior. You know, we can't move forward without a level of truth speaking. And then maybe that's just me, a Sagittarius, but the status quo has definitely been shaken up, and it's not going back to where it was. You know, there's no going back to what we used to call normal. And Haumea is, you know, Haumea is like, yeah, let's, what more? How can we make the world more beautiful? How can we live together in a more enriched way? And maybe in the Capricorn sense, kind of tapping back into traditional cultures who knew how to work with the land in a way that was in harmony. And she has an immense creative capability here, Haumea does. So she also is one of the expressions of these creator gods who take from the etheric realm. This is the realm where there are all kinds of possibilities. And what is it? Our desire, our excitement, our tapping into the creative energy brings forward something from the invisible into the visible. So here, this process, we start in right at this solstice, this Venus retrograde moment is what we want to be experiencing, what would we really enjoy experiencing. Now, there's one other contribution to this, and I'd like to bring in Sedna, who is the farthest of all of these TNOs that have been discovered, with an orbit that's somewhere around 12 to 14,000 years. And Sedna has been coming closer and closer to us in the last while. And she's at the far end of Taurus, and actually Sedna starts changing sign this year also. She moves into Gemini, well, almost in August, but wow. She really moves in. She gets up to like 29:55 and goes retrograde. And that's similar to Haumea, because Haumea gets up to 29:59 degrees of Libra, and she goes retrograde. So they're right on the edge. And Sedna is very slow moving. So, you know, Sedna going into Gemini, which is starting in 2023, and Pluto is starting
and the nodal crossing.
And yes, the nodes are crossing Sedna.
Wow.
So she is in a nice trine with Pluto, Earth sign to Earth sign. So Sedna represents such a deep, well, her story has a lot of trauma in it, but the depth of Sedna is so profound. And she brings in something from very deep in our collective consciousness. I mean, this is ages. Her cycle is like thousands of years. So the fact that she's in Taurus, helping Pluto right now, is bringing back, and some of the other TNOs are doing this too, I feel, bringing back some of the original, what is the Earth supposed to be like? How are we supposed to live on the Earth? And so
in harmony.
In harmony.
In harmony.
Yes. And Sedna is also squaring Jupiter to the degree. And so that Jupiter's wisdom is being demonstrated, perhaps, or brought into a deeper level, you know, stirring inside us somewhere to bring more attention to Taurus, of course, along with Uranus, that this deep Earth energy, something is stirring very deep inside the Earth herself, that's inviting us into this creative process with her. So, you know, there's a lot more to say about the solstice chart in relation to these TNOs and you know, but this just summarizes here the factors we have just been talking about, and some of the timing and this continuing square between Haumea and Pluto that is a big part of 2022. Even as, you know, Pluto's getting so close to changing sign, Haumea actually does start to change sign. At the end of this year, in November, she steps into Scorpio, even just you know, fairly briefly for a few months. And then Sedna also is starting to change sign. And in 2023, these next couple of years these are major sign changes, Pluto, Haumea, and Sedna, especially because it takes so long. You know, it's so that's just the summary I wanted to share, just taking the pattern that we've already gotten to know a little bit about, and that this is continuing and starting to shift sign in a way that's really going to change our world. So 2022 has a lot of potential. And if anybody wants to, I have the one more slide, Julia, if you want to.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I thought
one more, just to say, if people want the whole thing about my report of the KBOs in 2022, you know, look on the website because that's still available. And we went into some very interesting patterns between, you know, some of the ones that I hadn't been thinking about so much. And you may find one of these Kuiper Belt objects that really speaks to you, be it from your cultural connection or just, you know, the story, or, you know, there's something there for you.
Fantastic. Kelley, I really love this stuff because I've just put the link into the chat for anyone that wants to go into the full 2 hours of Kelley's presentation. I think it was just a bit under, and it was just so fascinating. And as you say, you know, finding one that resonates with you because they go beyond, you know, just the Grecian, you know, pantheon of gods and into so many different cultures. Which is kind of more of a unified cosmology, you know, in this collective experience. So you're doing great work here. I absolutely love it. And I think it's very important.
Great to do that, you know, because we were looking at them in it's a good primer for the KBOs if you've been a bit hesitant. It's a bit of a primer. And it's looking at how they interrelate in certain patterns. And there's some exciting ones in there.
Fantastic. And look, I did get many great reports, and people have said they've come to you after the session for sessions. Just again, I might have to get one as well as a New Year present. Anyway, thank you so much, Kelley. All the best to you. I'm going to now introduce our next. Hang on, let's stop that share. Our next agent, who's going to take over from me for the next hour or so, it's probably going to be more than an hour, isn't it?
Probably. Do I get host permissions then? Or
I still have to sort of be here in the background, but I'll do all the popping on and stuff. But so thank you so much, Kelley. I'm going to pop in the other agents
to get the little bit in there.
We'll talk to you soon. Thanks again. So Louise, first of all, I will introduce you, Agent 555, Louise Edington of Cosmic Owl Astrology. She's very well known to many of us on social media as I'm going to say, a bit of an heiress.
Yes.
She loves Eris.
I do.
And Ceres and all the goddesses.
Eris and Ceres particular. Yeah.
Someone and that's Venus, not afraid to say it how it is as well, which is great. You know, it's an agent trait, I think. So good to have you here, and good for taking on, let's say, this next segment where Rose, hang on, let's introduce Rose, Marcus, Ra, Rishikavi, and Patricia Walsh are all going to talk about, hang on now, someone's got some kind of feedback going on. Is that you, Ra? I'm just going to mute you. Yeah, I think it was Ra. It's easy to, you'll have, anyway, we'll work out your sound in a minute. But Louise, yes, you're going to take us looking into 2022 with these fabulous guys. So I'm still here. I'm going to leave it to you, and I'll leave you all on as a square. Yeah?
Yeah.
And with your screen, your slide, correct?
Yes, just the screen with the dates, first of all. And then I believe some of these fellow presenters have got things to share too, right? Because this is going to be more of a discussion than separate presentations. We're going to have a little chat about the overall themes of 2022, and I put 2021 up there. I'm still in 2020. I got 2022 right and the rest of it. So we're going to look at Jupiter in Pisces, which I'm very happy as my ruling planet moves back into Pisces, unfortunately too briefly. We're going to talk about the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, which very interestingly happened last time in Pisces in 1856, as the Republican Party was formed and had their first convention. So that's an interesting cycle with what's going on. And then we're going to talk around some of the eclipses and things. So I'm not actually going to really present. I'm going to kind of have a conversation. So I believe, who would like to come on first with me? Rose, I believe you had some stuff to say.
Yes, yeah, talking. Thank you, and it's wonderful to be on. And so, talking about the Jupiter and Neptune conjunction here, I have some slides to put up, if I may.
I think Julia has to, but she's in the background. So
oh, she has to do that.
If you share them, she'll put them up on the screen.
I'm not quite sure how to.
Ron,
I can
you're
hear
feeding back, just so you have to mute yourself.
I think, is that you, Ra? Yeah, it's Ra. Yeah.
What's happened? What's happened? Sorry.
Rose is trying to share her screen. We're trying to get.
Okay, Rose. First of all, unmute yourself. Unmute.
I've just put the chart up. Can you see it, Jules?
No, you at the bottom of the StreamYard there is a share button. Have you put that up?
Yes.
And it's giving you instructions to share a file or pop the file into the box.
Or share the whole screen.
I did that already.
What chart are we looking for?
We're looking for Neptune.
The Jupiter. Okay.
Okay. Let me just
Not surprised you can't find it.
All right.
I could just share my.
Yeah, I can just do it too. Hang on.
Okay.
Next. Is it set? Are you setting it for America? I've got a 0 chart here, so let me just share that.
Yeah.
No, it's just I had a lot of information to share there. I apologize.
Okay,
so
well maybe we can move on to something else. Can you send it to me and I'll
just talk.
Have you got a PDF of it?
Yeah, I'll just talk about it because it's just taking up a little too much time. I apologize for that. So the first of all, any planet in its natural sign is particularly strong. So Neptune's transit through Pisces is a really important transit for all of us, and that transit is 160 years around the zodiacal wheel. Jupiter and Neptune come together once every 13 years, but they're moving signs. And so, as Louise said, the last time that Neptune and Jupiter were together was in 1856, and the next time 1884. The next time, September 18, 1932, and 1971. Those are mutable conjunctions of Jupiter and Neptune around the wheel. 1856 was the last time Jupiter and Neptune were in the sign of Pisces. And Pisces is a signature that corresponds to the collective, right? So when Jupiter and Pisces are together, we have a peak of activity. I think it was mentioned earlier in the talk about cholera, and during the time that the last Neptune and Jupiter conjunction were together, despite the fact that that was a lengthy pandemic, it was a peak of that pandemic. Neptune rules, among other things, the immune system. And over this past 18-month period, the transiting nodes have been moving through the signs of Gemini and Sagittarius. And those transiting nodes have been in square to Neptune. And it was one of the reasons that I looked at the pandemic and recognized that it wasn't going away anywhere anytime soon, that we had at least 18 months that the pandemic was going to be effective and mutating as well, too, because that north node was in the sign of Gemini. We are moving in January to the transiting lunar nodes moving through the signs of Scorpio and Taurus. And Scorpio, south node in Scorpio and north node in Taurus. And these are the transiting nodes of the moon. And they are an 18-month cycle. And that 18-month cycle is where the eclipses happen along. Scorpio rules things like, bacteria and so on. The Scorpio-Taurus polarity corresponds to the survival. It's the survival axis. And here we have the Omicron coming in. We have an intensification happening. So with Jupiter moving into Pisces on December 28, spending the first quarter in the sign of Pisces and aligning on April 12, I think that's kind of, I think 2022 is a peak year of some kind. Jupiter is a planet that expands or increases, and Neptune is the collective. It's mass consciousness. And we see all the things that have happened recently, like the tornadoes in the mid-Southwest that have taken out so many people, and the atmospheric river that's been in my own backyard that has wiped out the farm fields. Like the things that take place during a Jupiter Neptune conjunction are something that are of global impact. That is something that we're all tuning into. And so I think that we'll see a peak. Perhaps we'll see a peak of this pandemic. As the year moves on, Jupiter is going to move into Aries from the middle of May through the middle of October, and it's going to be back for a few months into the sign of Pisces. We will have the transit of Mars at the end of the year moving into Sagittarius, and it's going to be forming a square to the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction at 23 degrees Pisces. So I think that by the end of the year, Mars is going to be re-stimulating that Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. And there are many re-stimulations throughout the year with this transit. Neptune, in its natural sign of Pisces, has everything to do with our ultimates, our ultimate sense of purpose, value, and meaning, our ultimate ideals, the search for our ultimate salvation. And Jupiter is about our belief systems and our search for truth, and it is about our cultural dynamics as well, too. Jupiter and Neptune coming together on April 12th are doing two things. They're culminating an entire collective chapter, and they're also seeding again. Here I'm Canadian. In Canada, we have the residential schools tragedy that is taking place, and the Indigenous, demanding an apology from the Pope. Pisces corresponding to religion, corresponding to spirituality. We also have an issue with clean drinking water. I think it was mentioned earlier about the doomsday glacier in the Arctic. The condition of our oceans, the sea levels rising, you know, everything to do with water, everything to do with the collective. Massive loss. But, you know, Jupiter and Pisces, you know, when we have loss with Jupiter and Pisces, we have kind of mass events taking place where, you know, whole swaths of people or whole groups of people, large groups of people are affected by that. The positive of that Jupiter and Neptune here, it's about finding new inspiration and about searching in new directions to find our hope and to find our salvation. Perhaps some others want to input?
Patricia.
Yeah, so, you know, none of us have compared notes. Oh, I'm echoing, I'm sorry. I think it's when you guys have a microphone and speaker. Yeah, I was on a panel this afternoon with EA Zoom meetings on the solstice, and I started it off by being that kind of Eris kind of person that Louise was talking about. You know, we haven't compared notes, but I think we're kind of all tuning into the same thing or a similar vibe. For me, I started tuning in just kind of collectively feeling when Venus was coming into orb of conjuncting Pluto, which is in the last few weeks. And what was coming to me, and I wasn't looking for this, it just started floating into my consciousness, was past tragedies that happened around Christmas, around the solstice and Christmas. And the two main ones that were in my consciousness that hit me at a deep level of grief when they happened, and what I think we're being challenged with right now, was the tsunami that happened in 2004 and the Sandy Hook shootings that happened in 2012. Both of them, the tsunami happened, now here's where you can't make this stuff up, that astrology, as Olga was pointing out, astrology works. Again, I've been feeling the vibe of collective grief. I'm not, you know, I don't want to say that we're, you know, possibly on the edge of something like that. But those kinds of instances, when they happened, did also do what this Jupiter-Neptune kind of energy wants us to do, which is to get to some kind of compassion, right? And some kind of collectivism rather than the division that we've been in. Now, I was saying astrology works. I'm not putting the charts up, so you'll have to follow me on this. When the Banda Aceh tsunami happened, 250,000, close to 250,000 people died. Like that, right? The day after Christmas. The nodes were 0 degrees Scorpio Taurus. They were, and as we know, the way that and this is what I was amazed, because when I started to look at the charts, I said, I hadn't even looked at them. I'm just feeling it. Like those memories are coming back to me of how impactful 2004 was. And I have a personal reason, because I lived in Newtown, Connecticut for the Sandy Hook shootings, and I was there. Yeah, it's very hard still for me to talk about because, well, it just is hard. The collective grief. Whew, okay. Sorry, let me just wind back a little bit.
Patricia, it was on my birthday, so.
Oh, wow. Yeah, just the 14th, right? December 14th, yeah. Yeah, just anyway. So the Banda Aceh, and I'm mentioning Banda Aceh because that's where the most of the people were lost in the tsunami, although it did hit something like 14 countries or regions. The nodes were 0 degrees at the time, and we know that the nodes move from 29 to 0, so that was a culmination of that. And in fact, the day of the tsunami is when the node shifted to Libra Aries. actually hours after the tsunami. So that's an interesting point. And then when I looked at the chart for Sandy Hook, the nodes were also, but they were Taurus South node, Scorpio North node. Mm-hmm. So in essence, a kind of reverse node. What we had at the time of Sandy Hook is archetypally resonant with where we are now, in that Saturn and Pluto were in mutual reception at the time. This is back in 2012. So at that time, and back in 2012, I remember giving a lecture in 2011 in Serbia where I was talking about that mutual reception, saying that this is a time of embracing collective shadow. And that particular incident to me couldn't be more starkly, it couldn't illustrate more starkly the contrast that we see within the Scorpio archetype, which to me speaks of the highest of the high and the lowest of the low, right? The slaughter of the innocents by this young man who I believe was possessed and out of his mind. I don't want to say that we're on that edge because, well, I guess what I would add to this, though, to give us some hope, although, the vibe is in the air, and the thing that we don't do collectively well is grieve.
Yeah.
And part of, and this is another interesting point, as I started to formulate these thoughts of what is arising for me and why are these things coming on my radar screen, and then I looked at the charts and the word came to me, collective grief. The very day that I was thinking that, I got a notification that Malidoma Some passed. And for those of you that don't know Malidoma Some, he is was an African Dagara shaman who traveled around the world doing collective grief rituals. And his main teaching was always to the West, saying to the Western world, we do not grieve our dead, we do not grieve our losses, and that therefore they are not at rest, and that they continue to infect and infiltrate, and then that's how we get the repeating cycles of history. If you can't bury something, it's still going to keep coming back, right? And this Venus retrograde time in Capricorn, is this kind of time where we're digging up. We're asked, and especially with the conjunct Pluto, and especially since it was an occultation, when Venus is conjuncting Pluto in longitude and latitude, it declination, as Olga was talking about, it's an occultation. So it's a very strong energy for us. Mm-hmm. Capricorn can represent grief, as Scorpio can too.
Have you heard of Stephen Jenkinson?
Yes. Yeah.
Who wrote Die Wise?
Yes, I know. I love his work.
Well, he talks about all this same kind of stuff. All this is coming up for me when you talk about this. But it's grief and compassion and kind of death doula-ship, isn't it? It's being a wise elder. Sorry, go on.
No, it's fine. And what's also important, though, is that that we have a lot of grief in the air. Mm-hmm. I mean, let's face it, since Pluto went into Capricorn, we've had one global catastrophe after another, right? Pretty much from the second that Pluto went into Capricorn, we had the financial crash, right? Housing crisis, financial crash, blah, 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 blah. We have the US going insane, for a period of time, right? The US going insane, and we're not out of that yet because we're heading to the exact Pluto return, but we've been cooking in it, come on. And then we had, now we have coronavirus, COVID, and, as I think we might all be in agreement with, it's not over yet. No. And all of the grief that's in the air. Now, at the same time, with this Venus retrograde, This is, to me, it's a culmination of the long period that people have been in during the COVID, during the lockdown pandemic, where they were reassessing their values. They were reassessing their worth. People were and are still, because the nodes were in Gemini Sag, there was a lot of movement during the lockdown, a lot of people moving, leaving jobs, working remote, surprisingly during the lockdown. I mean, that's why we have this housing bubble going on. So that's people, because of that, they were forced to reassess. Am I getting paid enough? Is what I'm doing really my calling? Is it really what I want? And I think that this Venus-Pluto conjunction and Venus retrograde is also heightening that, bringing it to some kind of conclusion to bring us into this nodal ingress of Scorpio-Taurus, right?
And that's
where
the
there's
repeating story all year, of course.
Yes.
Venus meets Pluto again at the same degree in the last day of the year. So
yeah. So I think this is a year of and I guess one thing I want to say is bury your dead and grieve them correctly during this time. And that's everything from cleaning out, your subconscious to cleaning out your closets, right? Physically cleaning out your closets.
Do you think part of it as well with Jupiter and Neptune is reaching greater heights of compassion, hopefully?
Well, here's the thing. So I shared this afternoon. No, we don't have the chart up, but I have to tell you the story because it happened this morning as I was contemplating this collective grief. And I was thinking to myself, God, I really don't want, who wants some kind of collective tragedy like that? And in fact, I still get tears in my eyes when my mind goes back to Sandy Hook. Who wants something like that? Nobody. And so I'm walking, feeling the weight of this, going, do I really even want to talk about that? And is this really something we have to move into in next year? Is there something like that looming on the horizon? Is there? And right when I was thinking about this, Venus going into the underworld and digging for gold, I said, maybe this time in this ingress, there's some gold to be found. And right when I said that, I saw this on the ground. And this is a little plastic ring, little kid's ring, but it has a jewel in it. And the jewel, but you can't see the color here, is amethyst, which is the colors of Pisces, right?
Yeah.
Or some of the colors of Pisces. So then, when I look at the chart for that and I see that the nodal ingress of Scorpio and Taurus will have Jupiter square. Jupiter in Pisces will square at the ingress, which may be this kind of blessing. I have Jupiter in Pisces in the 12th house, and I will be having my return, right? Which I feel a little ripped off because, Jupiter goes so fast by Pisces. I'd like it to hang out there a little bit more, right? But the point is, with it square the nodal axis, the way that Jupiter and Pisces has operated in my life has been, I can go to the edge and go where angels fear to tread, and some angel is going to pull me out, right? It's the saving grace.
Yeah.
So what I am hoping for and focusing on is that even if we go to the edge, right? Even if, we're looking down over the precipice of despair, that there is some saving grace, some collective saving grace, right? And on this panel I was on before, we were talking about hope and faith, and Jason Holly was saying, let's hope it's faith, right? Like let there be faith, right? And I think that we need that kind of rebirth of faith too, actually considering what so many people have been through. So I'm just putting that out there, and please carry it forward with your thoughts.
And that's exactly being demonstrated by, down there in Kentucky and here in my backyard too, these people who've lost everything. And you see them on the news and they're being interviewed and they're crying because they've lost everything. And here, I mean, the farms, I mean, they've lost animals because the animals drowned, in the barns. I mean, it's just been horrible. And then people come, volunteers come. Volunteering, by the way, is a Pisces archetype as well too. And they come and these people just show up and help. And and I think that these people have been so devastated, lost everything. They have that little kernel to hold on to. And that is exactly the angel pulling them out of the abyss, pulling them out of the edge. It doesn't take away from the unbelievable, overwhelming grief and loss, but there is something to hold on to. There is that light, right? And I do believe in humanity, and I do believe that we will find ours.
Ra, do you have anything to?
Absolutely. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yes, I have much, actually. The role of grief is very important because grief purifies.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing anybody wants, but as Yogananda said in his autobiography, pain is a prod to remembrance. Where are you going to go for healing? Unless we turn inward to our own source, God, cosmic consciousness, the heart, whatever we want to call it, and find that balance again on a collective level, we will continue down this road which will destroy the planet. So how do you turn the direction of specific cultures and humanity as a whole? I never liked to be a realist. I'm an idealist from way back. I had a column in a paper in Michigan when I was living there for 20-some years, a paper called Phenomenews. It was a New Age paper. I was one of the writers, and I once wrote a column called "Are We Canceling the Apocalypse?" And this was during the time of the fall of the Berlin Wall and the realignment of world politics, and a great hopefulness in the late 80s and early 90s that had to do, of course, with the Capricorn climax, Uranus, Neptune, and Saturn, all in Capricorn, the sign of governments, big business. And it all shifted miraculously, it would seem, at once. And the hope in the air was palpable.
Mm-hmm.
I call the pandemic the apocalypse.
Mm-hmm.
This is how it came.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't come through religious means. Horses are not riding through the air with dark figures on them. That was in the Lord of the Rings. That was a whole archetype there. But, we're facing the Nazgul in our own ways. And this sense of collective grief, particularly for America,
Mm-hmm.
under its exact Pluto return this coming year and in 2023, will be profound.
Mm-hmm.
We will get to the other side. But if you're an astrologer, you see what you see. And I have had sort of a long time of idealism kind of beaten out of me by the astrological aspects that I'm seeing. And I don't like it.
I would think Pluto and Capricorn had to make you a realist. Come on.
Well, you don't know me. I have my moon in Pisces, so you know. I call myself chronically cosmic. You know, I'm always up there. But this would seem like a good time. Can we go into some of the socio-political things for America that I see?
Yeah, can I also mention that nobody's talked about this, but when Olga had the declination up, or she had the lines, the planetary lines up for the solstice, I thought that she had the sun running through Russia, which to me, you know, Russia's amassing troops on the Ukrainian border.
Yeah.
And has been forging new alliances with China. You know, traditionally they've not been the best of bedfellows, but they would love to align, and especially if the U.S. is weakened in any way, and this shift of power from the west to the east is something that has happened through empires. So please go ahead, Ra.
Yeah. No.
Could I just mention before you dive in, Ra, that just to point out to those watching to look for here for this 27-degree Capricorn on the slide. That's the degree of Pluto in the USA's chart, and so we see. I mean, the Pluto return itself is happening, but we see these events too. Venus, Mars, and Pluto all conjunct the USA's Pluto on March the 3rd. Then Mars in Aries square Pluto on July the 1st, so near July the 4th, which is kind of a little...
That happens to be precisely opposite my Jupiter-Uranus conjunction at 27 Cancer, so I'll be okay. But I don't know about the country. The aspects for the Pluto return are not fun.
No,
not fun at all. And to the previous point of feeling the atmosphere of collective grief, all you have to do to remember what could happen in terms of potential is to remember that almost half the country, maybe not half, but a goodly portion of the country is ready to take up arms on behalf of a madman. That's all you have to remember. And there is so much potential for violence that all it's going to take is something very small to set it off. And so the next 2 years, particularly for America, are a tunnel, a dark tunnel through which we must go.
Now, I have to say, we can't exactly predict it's going to be another civil war or anything like that, particularly.
No, I'm not predicting it.
Yeah.
I am saying, however, that what's staring me in the face are some major incidents that are provocative, that look almost inevitable at this point, unless somebody really gets very stern, and that in itself provokes a reaction. So when we come to the Pluto aspects, we have to remember that Pluto, first of all, is the Roman word for Hades, the Greek god of death, who rules the underworld. Okay, Pluto, first and foremost, mythically, is death. That's the first thing you need to know about Pluto. The connotations of power, core issues, transformation are all secondary to the concept of Pluto as the lord of death. That means a release of the old. it being forced out of your hands and you can't do anything about it. The way I see Pluto relating to America in terms of its Pluto return is the death of the system as we currently have it. Now, we've been trying to tinker around the edges, but we have people out of their own corporate interests or just sheer personality defaults standing in the way of what is truly needed. And on the other side of all of this is a planet that's going to hell, that needs leadership, that needs America to be the shining light on the hill. And that's not happening right now. As a result, the soul of America needs to be reborn. How do you get there? How do you get to the other side of the tunnel? Going back to the concept of collective grief, sometimes it's just too much to take. 9/11 being the perfect example. It's, go ahead.
We've been in, just for everybody to be aware, we talk about this exact conjunction, but of course we've been in it archetypally since Pluto went into Capricorn in 2008. And most specifically when it came into orb of conjuncting 10 degrees of the 27-degree natal Pluto. But and also opposite its discovery point, which was 2017. So clearly 2016, 2017, and you can do the math of what happened then, right? But here, let's look at this though. And I'm sorry, there's a horrible echo. Would it be possible to mute yourself for a second, Ra? Because it's yours that's feeding back.
I don't know why it's feeding back, but
well,
yes.
because maybe if you have earbuds, try that, because it's the sound coming out that's.
Okay. Well, I don't have them at the moment here. So
okay.
Let me mute and you can speak.
So, I've been talking about this time, and thank you for mentioning it, Rod. Soul making. We are in the process of soul making. And soul making is not a airy-fairy, new agey crystals and light process, right? Soul making involves these places that Pluto brings us to, and especially Pluto in Capricorn. And Pluto in Capricorn is going to, dredge the bottom of every system that we've put faith in, and that's been happening. In a good way, and then we had Pluto-Uranus squares. We've had a whole bunch of, I called that period of Pluto coming into Capricorn as the winter of our discontent. And discontent drives evolution, right? Because we want something better, What we are seeing is the collective play it out. And, here's the difficult thing. On an individual level, we can do this kind of transformative shadow work, like I said, go down and clean out your psychic basement, clean out the cobwebs, look at your shadow, pull back your projections, do these kinds of things. On a collective level, unfortunately, they generally flow to the lowest common denominator, right? So we see kind of consensus level playing out, right? And that is this frustration of the angry white male, right? Which is the death rattle of that old patriarchal dinosaur. That wouldn't we all love to see that to go away, right? So my point though being is that we are in a process of soul making. And that's, here's the other thing though, the US, and you mentioned it, Ra, being that shining light, to a certain degree, I disagree with that. The US needs to be that role that we have in the puer sense of the way the rest of the world has put us there. We have been the golden child on the pedestal. And we've enjoyed that as Americans, those of us who are Americans. You know, that's that special sense. But that's because we're still adolescent as a nation, right? We're like the special little child that gets, you know, the favored son. And that's the way the rest of the world has looked at us. And necessarily, this knocking down in this soul-making process is like kind of when you get slapped in the face on your confirmation. There's a necessary maturation so that perhaps the US will be able to join as a nation, equal nations. Because when we talk about renovation of the system, it's not just the US system. Right? Yes, we are the head of the military industrial complex. Yes, the US is the benchmark currency, blah, 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 right? You know, but we need to take our place as an equal among equals. And that may also be part of what this process is. But that's also what I mean about the frightening part of the power dynamic shifting from west to east. Because on the other side of that, and I had a good friend mention to me when I was, you know, dissing the US at one point, he said, well, who would you rather have be set the global cultural tone? Would you rather that be Russia or China? So I don't know, you know. So I'm sorry. Please continue, Ra.
Well, I'd just like to mention as well, though, that of course the USA is going through a Neptune opposition as well, and that the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction will be opposite the USA's Neptune at the same time as the Pluto return.
Do we know anybody who's confused? Yes.
A lot of confusion, but also about kind of the Virgo, the Neptune in Virgo, kind of being kind of higher service, if you like, as well. We've kind of lost that a little bit in the USA. So maybe the Neptune Jupiter opposition is kind of a bit of a wake up to the ideals of what the USA was, that it's not lived up to.
Right. You know, in 1988, I was given the opportunity to read one of my poems, which was called The Document of Destiny, the American Constitution, on Constitution Boulevard in front of the White House, in front of thousands of people on the 4th of July, as part of a parade that was going on at the time. And there's nothing wrong with the Constitution, because basically it was a dream. It was an idealistic document that said, we will try to live up to these principles. It's all in the execution, right? There's nothing wrong with the Constitution. It can be revamped, has been at times. It's a living, breathing document in my view, but it's about how do we live up to it. And what we have now are very different views, retrograde views of that document and its ideals. And I believe that this is part and parcel of the broader demographic changes and the reaction to those changes. But remember that Mars is also retrograde in the US chart right now. So we're forced back upon ourselves during this long time period. And speaking of which, let me go to May and June, if I may. I don't have charts with me, so I'll just speak you through it. Saturn squares the nodes during the latter part of April and May. And moving into June, put some notes here, so let me go to those. Moving into June, when the Supreme Court generally comes out with its major pronouncements and judgments, we see Venus conjunct Uranus on June 10. We see a full moon on Trump's birthday, June 14. And remember, he was born under an eclipse. So it's the same full moon reconfiguration, if not an eclipse. but it's a repeat of the lunar solar birth cycle for him, which to my mind means increasing influence, not diminishing influence.
Venus is conjunct the North Node at that time.
Yes. And
Yeah.
because of these different factors, I am predicting that the Supreme Court will gut Roe v. Wade. What will that do to this society? There are, people are trying to prepare for it now, but it's a very retrogradation of the progress of Venusian principle, women in socialization. So with that in mind, you can see many, many points of social conflict already bubbling up that I think will culminate at that point in a collective roar of outrage. It's going to be a long, hot summer, in other words. And then we come to the actual midterm elections under a lunar eclipse.
I can share that chart if you like.
Yes, please do that.
As long as I just have to get that screen up first.
I should mention that Saturn also turns retrograde in early June, another sign of conservatism.
I'm just closing some windows here so I can actually share that screen. Well,
I mean, the whole retrograde thing is also in effect just by Pluto's presence in Capricorn.
Correct.
I mean, Capricorn itself is about reaching into the past. I mean, the image of Capricorn as the sea goat, to me, speaks of that Cancer-Capricorn axis, that you have to regress, go back, bring up that emotional material to actually move forward. So, to me, that Pluto wanting to evolve through Capricorn or push evolution in Capricorn is basically we need to go, one step forward, two steps back. What we have been finding, and I know you're going to touch into that, sounds like you're going there, is exactly this, this lie that's been put forward of make America great again, which really means make America black and white again, which really means some myth of what life was like back in the 1950s, right? And that this is part of the political agenda, or this is the mythos. This is the political mythos that's being put out there right now. Yes, we are going to have to deal with the consequences of that, right? But it's a wholly, without anything else, just put Pluto in Capricorn and you're going to have these kinds of movements, because the US isn't the only country that's experiencing a rise in totalitarianism and plutocracy and, conservatism, right?
Yeah. My friend Ray Merriman, who I've known for a long time from back when we were both in Michigan, financial astrologer, but also, renowned for his Uranus-Pluto predictions. I had an argument with Ray at one point regarding the coming cycle concerning the Arab Spring and the beginning of the Uranus-Pluto cycle in 2011 and 12, and where it would go. And being somewhat Uranian myself, I all for forward progress, and I'm an idealist and all that. And Ray said to me, I think until 2030 or so, when there is the opposition, or the first square, the waxing square between, it would be the opposition. There will be increasing political domination, authoritarianism, and then it's like a fever will break. And we've got 10 more years to go.
The possibility, though, of Pluto's ingress into Aquarius may bring some break there too.
My view is this, that Saturn is still in Aquarius, and the USA's moon is in Aquarius. The USA's moon, according to the Sibley chart for July 4th, 1776, is 27 degrees Aquarius. Okay. Saturn stations at 25 degrees Aquarius early in June, conjunct the USA's moon. There's no mistaking that. That is major step backward.
Mars also turns retrograde.
Yeah.
4 degrees from the USA's Mars.
What's right? Yeah. So come election day, the midterm elections in November, under that lunar eclipse, what you have, let me see my notes here.
Are we holding elections in London next year?
You know, the Queen would gladly take us back. I'm sure that's right. But no, the moon, of course, is in. I believe it's in. Let's see, it's November 8th, right? So it's in.
It's 17 degrees Taurus.
Yeah. Okay.
And conjunct Uranus at 16 degrees. And if you use the 213 birth time, the USA moon is 18 degrees Aquarius.
So what does Uranus symbolize? A revolution.
Right.
What type of revolution? Looks to me like a conservative revolution, but not just conservative, chaotic. I am predicting, I hate myself for doing this, but I am predicting the Republicans taking both houses of Congress. And if that's the case, where are they going to place Trump? I'm predicting Trump will run again. If he doesn't, it will be DeSantis as the nominee. But Trump's chart for November of 2024 is very good. I hate it, but I'm seeing what I'm seeing. The result of all of this is that I believe there will be much, much more polarity than we've ever even thought about, since we've been alive. The result of that is that I think there is tremendous potential for real violence under the Pluto return. And the result of that will have to be a rethinking of what America is, which ultimately is not a bad thing. But if Trump or another Republican or conservative or authoritarian is in office, the next election may not happen, but if it does in 2028, looking forward, there is daylight. With, as you mentioned, Pluto in Aquarius, and the inauguration chart looking very, very progressive. But the divisions opening up right now will take years to resolve. We are still dealing with civil war issues, right? So this country is in for its plutonian, go into the underworld experience right now. I believe that it will come out the other side. I'm not certain the government in its current form will survive. And that has implications for all of us in terms of how we live our lives. But to your previous point, Patricia, I really do think the U.S., if it's brought to its knees, will kind of go, you know what? There's another world out there that maybe we should join in a different way. Mm-hmm. It will sort of break the adolescent, testosterone-filled young man syndrome that we've had lording it over people because the collective need is so dire. So while I can't say it's a completely necessary thing, because I don't think it's totally necessary that we go through all of this, I do think the way things are going, it is likely. I won't say it's inevitable, but I will say that it's likely. And I'm looking toward the future. I do believe that we will come out of this in a positive way. But
So let's do a thinking exercise, panel. Let's try to imagine, because we are also coming into that Jupiter, Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, Jupiter in Pisces. This is using our creative capacity for imagination, or using imagination as, a real way to create different realities. What could we envision? What do we imagine, or could we imagine collectively, of a way that the US comes to reckon with its shadow, because that is what this process we're talking about is. We can't continue, or we've tried to sweep under the carpet the shadow and the legacy of racism and slavery and misogyny and the usury nature of the US and the idea of being the world leader and hoarding the resources and all of these things that are part of the US's shadow. What other way can we do this collectively as a nation? Or do we see now, to a certain degree, I see glimmers of it happening collectively. I was a little bit poo-poo about the Me Too movement because I've just been there before. I was doing rape crisis counseling when I was 16, talking about these issues and, tracking back the early feminist movements and seeing them rise and then not, make a little bit of change and then go under and then rise and make a little bit of change. I was a little bit like, oh, okay, me too. I mean, happy that it's coming up for discussion. But the point is, it really did move some things, right? Now, here we are, right? Are we going to have a Roe v. Wade overturn? It moves some things, maybe not.
Well, I think the reaction to the reactionary impulse will be extremely fierce, and many people will be not just in the streets, but it will be a profoundly moving experience because for the first time, it really will be the government edict against the will of the people. Most of the people. That hasn't happened before since we've been alive. That just hasn't happened. And women, as a result, will come more and more to the fore because they must.
Well, let's not forget that, I don't wish it upon anybody, but the potentiality of Joe Biden passing away and Kamala becoming president.
She is actually under her second Saturn return early in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, when I had looked at the charts originally, I predicted Biden when I'm a Bernie fan myself, but when I looked at the charts in 2018, I said, looks like Biden, but he won't be declared the winner for a week. Sure enough, Saturn and Sun aspect. But he is almost 80 years old, and anything can happen at any time. And come 2028, I see aspects which do indicate a female president, if we do still have the system in place at the time. And I tend to think that if something does happen to Biden and Kamala is the president, a lot of this will be alleviated because she is an activist and will not hesitate to use means at her disposal if she's in that position to be able to combat what women would see as an evil.
Now, would that be our Jupiter square that nodes? Ingress and you know what I mean? When Jupiter square, would that be our grace that we could actually have somebody in power who would fight these things?
I would hope so.
Yeah.
That the big American eclipse of 2017 went through the whole country. I went to Kansas City, somewhere I'd never been, to see that in its fullness. Well, 2024, the big eclipse once again moves right across the country. Okay,
Oh, that's right.
so.
Yeah.
Well, there's two. They cross in Texas.
Where else, right? So, America is the center of the apocalypse, basically, and everything, all the changes, because of what has to happen, because of America's position in the world. If America's breaking down, that means the world order basically has to be completely rearranged. And with the eclipses literally running through America, we're still the center of whatever is going to happen for the world. And if, by the grace of the divine, we have a leader who can combat the retrogradation, and by the way, Trump's chart is also highly activated again in 2024 by the eclipse. All of these things, of which Trump represents, the collective shadow of America, can be, if not alleviated, certainly lessened in its destructive potential. So, I don't know, should we pray for a President Kamala Harris? I don't know.
Well, let's try and finish on a more hopeful note.
I was going to say, let's see what thoughts does everybody have on a personal level for people working with this these energies coming up.
Well, personally, the whole looking at everything, I think the pandemic and the North Node in Gemini has been pulling us back more into our local communities and thinking about. I've seen a lot more community gardens growing, things like that. People sustaining each other. I think so. We've had that, and then I think the North Node moving into Taurus. I actually kind of like that the North Node is in Taurus because I think we're getting down to our core values with this year, and so there's a lot more. Closing in, I think, this chaos out there really in some ways doesn't affect every person individually that much, so we're going down into personal survival mode with these eclipses and the nodes going into Scorpio and Taurus, I think, and closing into what really matters, like the family and the home and that which we really value. So I think that's a positive move in many, many ways. And I think, worrying less about what a government that is clearly not working in any level is doing. It feels kind of futile in some.
Yeah, I echoing what you're saying, to me, when I was looking at the nodes, the Scorpio Taurus, on a personal level, I think that the keyword, I like to give keywords to, or I get keywords when I look at shifts, planetary shifts. And when we had the Gemini Sag nodal shift, the keyword that came to me was question everything, especially because Neptune was square.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we come in with Jupiter squared. To me, it's an assessment of what do I want and what do I need.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're talking about that simplification process that both Pisces and Taurus call us to. Right? There is a simplification, a purification, or a purity that exists in the Pisces archetype that Jupiter magnifies, being its ancient ruler. And so this kind of, and again, Pluto in Capricorn is a belt tightening signature, right? It's the winter, like I said, the winter of our discontent. So yeah, but it may be this, and like I said, a conclusion of that period where people for the last 2 years have been reassessing their values, their worth, where they're living, how they're working. They're going to demand more than minimum wage. They're going to demand health care. They're going to do things that are, more human, right? And not just a cog in the wheel of the military industrial complex. And that this North Node then, gives us this opportunity, I think, this conclusion to really ground to that, right? That now there's been a lot of tilling, and the fertile earth is there to receive the seeds of what people have been gestating, as far as their reassessment of who they are and what they're worth.
And the Taurus and North Node, we're just getting started on it, and we have 18 months. It's like, tuning in, right? Tuning in. What are your core values? What's essential for you? It's all about what has value and meaning on a personal level. Louise, you're quite correct there in terms of, and I think I've heard it from so many people. I'm so tired of watching the news and so on, and maybe that's good. Tuning inward. What's the personal and private life journey about? And, as I always say, as you toss the pebble into the water and you get the concentric circles, if you can come back to center and figure out, what is of value and meaning to you, you have such a greater opportunity to contribute to the collective shift. So it all starts with one.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree, and to just put a really positive spin on all of this. Behind the clouds, the sun is always shining. We are very, very small. It seems large to us just because we don't have the cosmic perspective. Go back to the Bhagavad Gita. If you think that the soul is slain just because the body is slain, you do not know the truth of things. So cultures, nations, and the planet itself have cycles. We are just, living through our own small perspective on all of this. My view is still that the dawn will come, that the earth will be renewed, because it must be. We can cooperate with it or not, but it will happen. And I really do believe that we will come through this. And the purification aspect of Pluto, of being dragged down into the underworld, we eventually will come to the surface again. And it will be a better world because of it. Because, we won't make the same mistakes again. We won't want to go backwards. And by necessity, if the planet is warming and we have to be able to reevaluate how we actually live on the earth, it will require a different culture. So, the poet Shelley once said that most men are cradled into poetry by wrong. We learn in suffering what they teach in song. Well, that's us. We can do it the hard way or we can do it the easy way. And for some reason, we always just seem to pick the hard way.
Well, and I have to say, despite all kind of the fear of all of the things that could happen, especially in the USA with the Pluto return and things, personally, I lived in a war zone in the 70s in Northern Ireland. I lived in the middle of it. And most of us just carried on and had very normal lives in the middle of it. So, even if there is some violence and things, it's going to be horrible. It's going to be upsetting. There will be collective grief, to speak to what Patricia said. But most of our lives, we just focus on our lives. And so, don't all go into this fear.
This is a new role for me because I don't like what I'm seeing here. And I always like to take the more positive points of view because I really do think that we don't have to go through this in the worst way.
Yeah.
We really don't. And my hope is that there will be enough of a raising of consciousness to say, you know what, thus far and no further. That's it.
We're going to put that on a T-shirt. Thus far.
Yeah. Well,
and
the
we've gone well
positive.
over the hour. So
Yeah.
Rose, do you have anything more to add? Because you came in. Rose, do you have anything more to add?
Yes, I just wanted to say that the Venus transit is so important for the whole year ahead. We are starting out with Venus-Pluto, and we're ending the year with Venus-Pluto, and in the sign of Capricorn. And Capricorn is the archetype of time, and time is a resource that we need to put to good use. So wherever Venus is traveling through Capricorn, it's going to spend all the way to the beginning of March in that sign. It's giving you an extended period of time to figure out what your priorities are, to do that reassessment, reevaluation. And it's very interesting this first quarter of the year because Venus, Mars, and Pluto align together between the March 3rd and 5th. And Venus and Mars are a 2-year cycle. Mars and Pluto are a 2-year cycle. Venus and Pluto are a 1-year cycle, and they're all coming together at the same time. I think that is quite incredible because it's like, moving the crystallized patterns. I think that we're all looking for significant change, significant relationship change. I want to change. I want to change my relationship to the people around me, to the world around me. Venus and Mars do that every 2 years. They're doing a new cycle, but you throw Pluto into the mix, and this is your opportunity to make some really significant core fundamental change. And it comes first through how you are evaluating and how you are resonating. Right after those three align, Venus and Mars are going to go new phase in the sign of Aquarius. So we have, great prospect. I feel very hopeful. I know we've gotten very down, but I feel very hopeful in terms of if you have said to yourself, I want change. I don't know how to do it. I haven't been able to get there. There are an awful lot of transits through the entirety of this year that are going to help move you forward. And I think that that's something very, very positive.
Yeah, that's, to me, that's the culmination of this whole process we've been in, that March 3rd, March 4th, March 5th, when Venus and Mars are conjunct and they're balsamic to Pluto, and then they jump new phase to Pluto. To me, that's a kind of like, finally, if you've been in that energy of discontent, you don't know what you want, you'll find out what you need, but it may be very much clearer after that, with like a real direction and a drive. And then Venus and Mars track each other until Venus pops out into Pisces, right? So I think that I do see that also as a really opportune time. And again, I also see that grace of Jupiter in the transiting nodes. I see that grace of the Jupiter square and Jupiter and Neptune conjunct also in Pisces, right?
Yeah, and this would be a year to have some bravery as well, too. Pluto is the agent of change. Something's going to change. Align with it. Know that there's hard work to be done. Know that there may be things to give up. But if you will, face that reality, be practical about looking at the work that you have to do ahead, you will be rewarded. That's what I think.
I would agree, and I think that this is, there's a term in yoga called swadharma, which is one's own personal duty and purpose in life. And I think that this is has been and will continue to be, because of everything that's going on, an excellent opportunity to really get very clear on what your purpose is here in your life. How many times was it said, "Stop the world, I want to get off"? And what happened? Right? So we've all been given a blessing in its own way, a retreat, maybe involuntary, but still a spiritual retreat to re-examine ourselves, re-examine our own purpose in life. And so what they're calling the Great Resignation, I think, is part of that. What you really have been forced to do but isn't in alignment with your soul purpose, people are giving up. I think that's great. And I think this is part of a collective consciousness realignment.
I agree, but I think Roberta in the comments said about chopping wood, carrying water. I think a lot of it is coming back down to earth, to things that really matter. Like, I've actually prepared a garden bed to plant vegetables next year. Your purpose doesn't always have to be some big highfalutin.
Did you see that meme going around that said things that give me power, and it was a bar graph, and one said money, and it was like the bar graph, and then it was like, you know, status in my career, and then it was the bar graph, and then it said growing a tomato, and it was like the bar graph is off the charts, right? Our changing priorities, our changing values.
Yeah.
And let's not forget this little jewel I found. Okay, right as I was contemplating all of this, right? So let's not forget that even when we journey the underworld, Pluto is the Lord of wealth, right? And there's always gold down there in the underworld. There's always jewels to be found, right?
Yeah, you're in it all. Oh, Julia's coming back on. I think we're probably
I'm not predicting anything that cannot be changed.
Yeah, and I don't, you know, like I said, I don't want any of that collective grief to come upon us, but I do think it's, you know, there's that retrospective energy that it's fine to dig it up and grieve it again, even if there isn't some, you know, some massive event that brings us to our knees again. Right.
Well, we kind of had it, really. How many deaths here?
I know.
Yeah. So, anyway.
Yeah.
Hi, Julie.
Okay.
Hello. I'm not breaking things up. I'm just kind of coming in.
Oh no, we're way over time, so we're
Oh wow! So much to talk about, isn't there?
Yeah.
Well, the best thing to do, everyone, is make sure you keep up to date with what the agents are doing next, and hopefully we can do more of this throughout the year. With this, I invite all of you agents, if you want to put something on, like, you know, a free webinar, just get in touch. You know, I've got something to talk about. I want to talk about it with so-and-so. So, you know, it's an open invitation to all of our wonderful agents out there. As you can see, they're all very expertly knowledgeable in this astrological world. It really is about realigning values and living according to, you know, very much the last Venus cycle, the last 19 months, and how they now culminate and begin again with the journey of Venus through her retrograde. And the 40 days and 40 nights are already so powerful. I mean, we might find ourselves just kind of changing habits, you know, changing the way, or switching off from the world for a while, because it really does our head in, doesn't it?
And then we have the Libra star point starting, of course. So that's
yes, haven't even got to talk about that. We'll talk about that more later. Yeah. Patricia was part of the Venus chapter webinar that we did with Adam Gainsberg and Adam Summer and myself. I think it was 5 hours in the end. Incredible information. I mean, Patricia, if we can just kind of highlight one of the things you said through that, or taught us in your going back into the Venus history, was her measurement rod, the stick and the rope
That Venus is the civilizer, right?
Yes.
And she's the metronome that in archaeoastrology, that she is, or archaeoastronomy astrology, she is the metronome that reconciles the metonic cycles, or the solid lunar calendar.
Yeah, there you go. So how important she is making her mark as we begin into 2022. Again, there's so much more to talk about, but I'd love to just thank all of you for being involved, and Louise gathering the other agents as part of this. Kelley, Olga, Louise, Rose, Ra, and Patricia. And we hope to get you, let's say, on the CIA ticket. I know, Patricia, we already talked about your section in that Venus. We want part 2 because there was so much to share. Louise, we have to book you in for a webinar. Same with Rose. And Ra, I want to congratulate, because his article on James Bond that was in our Time Lords magazine.
Very well. Very well.
It's now going to be on astro.com, yeah?
Yes, it was very well laid out. And is it up now on astro.com?
I'm not sure if it's there yet, but it should be soon.
But you know what? The Venus Pluto was good for me, because I got the book contract under Venus Pluto. So
there you go.
Everything, can be a positive.
Well, again, Venus Pluto is so power packed, and there's a comet. So, again, look ahead with gratitude, and as much as is falling down, there's very fertile things ahead, especially with Jupiter and Neptune, and the creative impulses that we all have as creators of this world. Step up and do your agent role to be part of that. So look, I promised that I would gift a membership to our CIA Academy, where we get all these wonderful teachers and more as part of our academy and learning. Sorry, Ra, I've got to unmute you again, because every time, sorry. So I want to actually give it to Susan Aram, who's been on the chat here, but she's also been on very much in our social media and thanking us for so many things. So we thank you for being part of the stream here and over time. So I'll get in touch with you. I do have your email, and we will gift you a CIA membership, a yearly membership that is worth $180 US, which is about $15 a month. But for this solstice week, as we usually do, we got a 20% off sale. So if you go to the website, it's already kind of on sale. So please join us. Have a look at the amazing archives we have as well. Like there's over 85 videos there now that we've collected over the years that you can access anytime. And 2 a month, or about 20 plus a year. And then extras and bonuses and all these discounts to a lot of other things. So keep your eyes on that. And the things that we have coming up, as well as the free stuff, and hopefully we do more. It's just all about who wants to be on board and on time with us at any particular time. But in February, we have Ona Dosa, a Turkish astrologer, Agent 24, who is going to be doing a talk on traditional and modern delineation, putting together the traditional and modern methods. It's really, I don't want to say a trend, but it's almost like a necessity of understanding astrology and doing it. Then we have invited Luis Ribeiro from Portugal to show us his amazing work he's done on explaining the house systems. And it's often one of the things that, people go like, I don't understand the houses. So it is a big step up to understanding why and which house systems you use and how they are actually worked out. So, taking you up the next notch of understanding that. And then Wade Caves on electional astrology in March. And we are organising a bigger event called The Dreaming in in connection to the Neptune-Jupiter conjunction, which is all about astrology, dreams, inspiration, art, and magic. And I will tell you more about that in January. So that's my next mission, to organize that.
Count me in that, Jules, because you know I'm way into the imaginal, and
yes,
you know yes. So count me in on the dreaming.
The agents that are interested to give me a topic that they'd like to do, because if we get more, we can actually go for a week really and just kind of have an open story. It will be a paid thing, but I think there's just a lot to share on that. So keep an eye on the details for that. If you haven't seen our Time Lords magazine, do get into it. It's really good. And the next one's due on February the 1st. And then the Venus chapter, for anyone that wants to go deeper into the Venus story, the Venus star points, and how to use them in for the next year and so on. Have a look at the website for all the goodies that we have to offer. So with that, again, thank you to everyone. Happy solstice. Enjoy the solstice day. Are you guys all doing something special?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I'm doing another presentation.
Building a fire, burning some stuff, having people over for some food, taking walks in nature. That's what solstice is all about for me.
Yeah. I mean, again, with Pluto, Venus, burning things in the fire, letting things go.
Letting it go, cleaning out the closets.
Do the rituals, do them consciously with intention. And with that, we wish you all the best. Thank you to all the agents. Thank you to all
Thank you all. Thank you, Louise. Thank you, Louise, for holding space and for being here and bringing us together.
Okay.
And Julia, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Happy solstice. Bye-bye. See you next time. All right.